Okay, after this great presentation, I hope I made it seem great. So this is part of a bigger paper. I just took out the part that's related to the rental cap. I don't know if the title gives some information about what I'm going to talk about, but from pan con tomate to avocado toast, how the rent cap fueled MTRs. MTRs are medium-term rentals. So I'm going to explain you more in detail what are medium-term rentals in the case of Barcelona, because it depends on what geographic place you're analyzing, depends on the regulation and where is the gray zone. Okay. So I'm going to analyze, I'm starting to analyze a work in progress, how the rent cap increased the supply or the listings of MTRs, and also decreased, of course, the offer, the supply of long-term rentals. So just to give a little bit of context, the topic is very important right now because it's going to be regulated. It started a national register, which is something new. We have a register, for example, for Barcelona, because it was a local, I would say law, I don't know, but it was a local
policy or whatever.
Yeah. And so now it's the first time that exists one at national level where short-term rentals, so Airbnbs, and also temporary rentals, which have been now in the news the last 2 years. But as you will see, the papers that have talked about this are, first one was mine and was in 2021, I think. Okay, so it's a very new topic. It's a new type of rental that's important to discuss because, as we know, we have different types of housing. Everybody wants to have a roof on their head, and even though if they're not perfect substitutes, sometimes they work as they would. And so we skip some regulations that should protect the tenant. In this case, temporary rental or medium-term rental, as we'll call it from now on, it's one of that situation. So from the 1st July on, all the flats have to be registered, touristic ones and medium-term ones, at national level. Now, of course, since this was a regional power before, there have been some problems between states and autonomous communities in Spain. So we'll see what's going to happen. But we have already a high registration of temporal and short-term rentals. And the interesting part of this register is that in the case of temporal rentals, they give the renter the responsibility of having all the characteristics that a renter for a temporal rent should have. Okay, so you as a renter, when you sign a contract as a temporal renter, you should have some characteristics, prove them. And if you are not proving them right, or figure out that you are taking some of the characteristics that you need to have, then it's the renter's fault. So it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to evolve. One thing more about the temporal renters, so it's not going to be in this paper, but the evolution in Barcelona looks the following. We have the introduction of STR licenses, so Airbnb in Barcelona. From that point on, a lot of supply does the influx to temporary rental, which actually better, but it's more than 30 days. The regulation is for flats of 30 days and less. Okay, so it's outside the regulation. That was the first time we see a peak in MTR supply in the Airbnb data, so Airbnb platform. Yes, I use different data to be able to approximate the supply of temporary rentals because it's not very centralized. So one side, we see that Airbnb platforms also offer these flats, and they say, I don't need a license in Barcelona because you have to rent for more than 32 days or 30 days. Some haven't read that much the regulation, some say 30, some 31, some 32. But the idea is between 30 days and 11 months, so not 1 year, because then you are in the regulation of long-term rentals. That was the first peak. The second peak is during COVID, where we have a drop in tourism. So the Airbnb suppliers that say, okay, I don't have any demand, I switch to another market. And the third peak, the strongest one, is during the rent cap. Okay. Where we see, we have discussed it before, but the listings or the active supply for long-term rental has dropped significantly, and the temporary rental increased. Okay, so in the case of Barcelona, the medium-term rental will be defined as stays of more than 31 days and less than 1 year. And if you go to the Idealista, you can check it now if you want, but they will always say 3, 6, 11 months or less than 11 months. So normally that's what do they offer. No? They don't say about 31 days or more, but what you will see in the listings is that information. Okay, so we have the regulation for short-term rentals. No, almost 10,000 licenses were given in 2017. From that point on, the legal market, of course, now we see a very stable evolution of the listings offered in Airbnb. And then we have the urban rental market, no, that we know regulates the long-term rental, so the residential rental. And it's not that temporal, seasonal rental, also called, wasn't included in that decree, but it was just described. There was not registration or any follow-up. Not so what was happening. It was saying just that you have to put in the contract the purpose of the stay. You know, so you have support to say, okay, I'm going to stay here for short term, no, for medium term, let's say, because I'm a student or I come here for temporary work and I'm going to leave. So you can avoid that, which is kind of the main problem of temporary rental, that there is an influx to the temporal from the long term. And at the end, because of needs, we accept the instability and higher prices, renting for 6 months, 11 months. I mean, I just went to see a flat and there were temporary rentals inside. It was not to buy. I didn't buy it because I'm young, I can't have access to housing yet, but it was interesting because the people that were offering me the flat, they said, for example, this have temporary rental, but we can increase it for 11 months more if you want. So they pay the rent and stay in the house. It was a family that lives in Barcelona. It wasn't people that were staying there for half of a year, So that's the main issue that we are using, or that the market is using the MTRs for the demand of long-term rentals. So at the end, it's not protected until now by any rent cap. Actually, the price is even higher than before the rent cap, the long-term ones. And there's less protection to the tenant because it's not in the same regulation standards. Okay, so that would be kind of the main issue in how in Barcelona will be defined. There are other papers in Canada, for example. So the definition depends a lot on how short-term and long-term rental is regulated. If they are regulated, long-term normally is. Short-term, in some cases, it's not. Okay, so I already said, this is going to be the proposal in 2024. They have to include more information now, and not just in the contract, but an annex that proves actually that you're going to stay for that time. So it's a little bit more information now, mandatory, in case you want to rent a temporary renter. And the Royal Decree Office regulation where they want to create this digital registry, which is already working. I don't know if I have the information here, but I think it was only 20% of the flats that wanted to participate in the register, let's say, or the property owners that want to register their flat as temporary rental, they were accepted at the end, because also you have to follow some conditions. That's going to be the 1st of July. It's already working a little bit. And additionally, because again, here's always the problem, or not the problem, but the reality that we have a national jurisdiction and also regional jurisdiction. So in the case of Catalonia, additionally, you have to include more information in the register. Here's the information. So we have 3 weeks. This was 2 weeks ago. I got the information. 3 weeks before the July 1st, where this register enters, gets activated. Of the 89,000 applications, only approved 50%, and 11 were rejected. Okay, so not as I was saying, but still. And we see already the size, no, but this is at national level. You will see that in Barcelona it's quite more representative. Why it's important, I already have introduced with some ideas, no, but we know the effect that short-term rentals, so touristic rentals can have in cities where there is a very tense market. No, the shift of units, it's very simple to understand. If we have more units in the short term, we have less units in the long term. If we have less units in the long term, no, then we have a rising price, and also, this, for example, gentrification processes, that we see in the hype neighborhoods. And besides the typical gentrification process of short-term rental, we have now something called transnational gentrification, which is related to the title, pan con tomate to avocado toast. What is happening with that units, who has the ability to pay, for example, for temporary rental, because as I said, the price will be higher. Here, another driver not related to what we were saying about transnational gentrification is the increase of digital nomads, could be one of the drivers as well. No supply, because they can say that I'm going to stay just 6 months and I'm going to move to another place. So it's very important, since this, after COVID has expanded a lot, to understand what are the implications that we have people from other countries, probably richer countries or with higher incomes, coming to be able to rent something that a local person, that I will call genuine demand. Yeah. And what else? Okay, now to what we were talking about. Now I give you an introduction about what is happening with the temporal renter. But now we have the rental cap introduced in 2023. I actually analyzed the reaction to the cap, which was when it was announced. No, there are 2 points. When it was announced, normally we see already a reaction in the market when a law is announced. But then in the introduction, we also see an effect. It's a little bit less, because with the announcement already, there's already some reactions of the market. Here we have the previous research on MTR. You see, the non-study. Yeah, I mean, the ones that are empirical, there are 2 in the whole literature from now. And we have Coco Lagan, which is very specialized in gentrification, for example. And here there are interviews to, for example, places like Uniplace, which are offering only temporary rentals, to understand the dynamic. And Lisbon is always a very good comparative regarding to housing markets when compared to Barcelona. It's quite similar. So yeah, the last ones are related to this more gentrification, transnational gentrification process than actually analyzing the shifts of the market, but they're very related outcomes, because that group needs a place to stay, and normally it's temporal rental. Okay, so what are the research gaps? Since it's a very new topic, there are a lot of research gaps. If you want to get on board, there are many ideas that can be analyzed. In general, we know that rental caps analyze price and supply. We have also seen now rental return, very interesting. Then there is limited attention to the segment MTR, medium-term rental. Another part would be compared to short-term, which is with license, or long-term, what are the incentives of a property owner to put the flats within that market and not another one? And of course, how we're going to regulate and what are going to be the effects of that regulations of MTR. Okay, so again, it's a work in progress. There are many, many ideas. I'm trying to identify which are be able to identify the impacts later. That depends, of course, on the data and the time period. We are just introducing, for example, now the regulation of temporal rental. Of course, it's very difficult to analyze the impact that's going to have. So general objective of the study is investigate how the introduction of rent caps influences the medium-term rental. Again, this is one part of the study. The other ones are related to MTR, but not rent caps. So I just reduced the analysis to the rent caps for this day. Specific objectives: identify the migration, the units migration from LTR to MTR, then analyze the role of the unregulated MTR analysis to circumvent the LTR. So how are actually originally LTR property owners using the other markets to escape the regulations of the long-term market and, well, analyze the relationship a little bit between the rent cap price supply, but incorporating the unit flows, which I think is very, very important to understand the dynamic of the units. Now, are they empty? Are they in short term? Are they in mid term? Are they in long term? Are they on the property market? No, why are they moving? How they're moving? I mean, on data, it's very complicated to analyze this, but I mean, if we would have the data on that, we could understand a lot how the dynamics of a market works. So that's kind of my main purpose. For now, I have Idealista data and Airbnb data and registers information, but with good data, there's never enough. So for this part I'm going to present, I'm only using the Idealista platform, which probably you all know. If not, it's one of the biggest platforms in Spain. It has almost all listings of long-term. Until a couple of years ago, where also temporary rental started to appear. Actually, if you want to check, now probably most of the flats that you will see listed for Barcelona says alquiler de temporada. Okay, that's what it means now, for less than 11 months. Okay, so I use this data. We have all the characteristics of the flats, the location at postcode level, and its monthly data. Okay. Again, I'm going to leave it out because again, it was from the other presentation. I should have taken that out. Okay, so here we have the evolution just of the listings. So remember, this is not the register information, it's just the listings, but it's important. Okay, so here is the axis for long term. No? So we see that it drops until this point. It's the red one. For the last information I have, so December 2024. We're talking about, I think it was 3,300 listing. And at the same time, we have the MTR, which were, I think, 1,300. So it's 40% of the listings that are offered in Barcelona are temporary. And if you analyze the evolutions, now here we have the announcement of the rent cap and then the introduction. So they are, no, I mean, pre-trends we cannot call it because we have different accesses, but we see how the behavior changes quite drastically in the case of medium-term rental. So again, I'm very open to any ideas of how to improve the identification strategy. Right now, I'm using a diff and diff. Really? Okay. I didn't saw the 5 minutes though. Okay, 1 minute. And just gonna show you the results, which sorry, but yeah. Okay, so diff and diff. Why control? Because not all the flats are in the regulation. If the flat is less than 30 square meters, it's not regulated on the rent cap. And if the flat is bigger than 150, say the results. 150 square meters, they're also not included. Okay, so we have a group that actually shouldn't be impacted by the rent cap. We will see that they still go with the trend of temporary rentals. Just here, not treated and controlled dwellings. It's not that clear that we have a parallel trend that doesn't change, that does change at the end. But well, we see that at least the treated have a little bit of a higher impact, but both see impact. And actually, when I look at the results, we see that in general, the ones that were not regulated, also 30% of higher chances to be an MTR. Okay, so the outcome, yeah, the variable that we're analyzing is the probability of being one or the other, being one temporary rental and 0 long-term rental. Okay, so here you can interpret this as a percentage point. So the probability of being a long-term rental after the cap is 30.8% higher than before the cap, announcement of the cap. But if I use only the sample from 10 to 50, because now we have the cap at 30, we see that also, this is just for the ones that were not treated, no? Here this happens the same. And interesting is here that the treated were already higher, but of course, because they're smaller, and temporary rentals tend to be smaller than long-term rentals. Okay, so it's quite easy to explain why we see the effect of the treated even before the rent cap. There was already a trend of increasing temporary rental. Here was another idea. I did a regressive discontinuity using the 30 square meter threshold, but there are two bins that create some issues, so it's just a test. And I don't know if there's something. Okay, here you have the model. And then again, conclusions. I mean, there are not many conclusions, but we see that there is an increase after the cap, after the announcement of the cap, affected to all and more affected, as we see here, more affected to the treated group. Not in the case for this one, since we already see previous behavior. And that would be it. Any question or suggestion for this work in progress? And thank you very much.